Good evening all, and welcome to round 3 of the Apex Online Racing IMSA Lights Endurance Series, where today we will be providing coverage for you from Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca. Now, the lobby will be going live in about 10 minutes time at quarter past the hour, where we will start our qualifying session, which will last 20 minutes, I believe. Either 15 or 20 minutes, with both the GT4 cars and also the LMP3 cars out on track. But in the build up to that, I thought it would be a good idea to give you guys an update on the season calendar, how we're progressing so far through that with the upcoming rounds, and also take a look at the previous race results from round 2 and how they have affected the championship standings. So coming on to the season calendar then, you can see that we've already done 2 rounds, the first at Circuit of the Americas and the second that we did last week at the Watkins Glen GP circuit, which was our first of 3 90-minute races. This week for round 3 on the 7th of February here, we are going to be doing the race at Laguna Seca, like I've already mentioned, and we are going to be racing for a total of 60 minutes once the race actually gets underway. Next week, we are going to be taking a break as it's Valentine's Day, and obviously myself and a lot of other drivers who have partners and all those involved with the league would like to have a break for Valentine's Day to spend it with their other half. So we're taking a week's break, and then we're returning on the 21st of February, where we'll be racing at Long Beach for round 4, and that will be our second 90-minute race. Round 5 on the 28th of February will be at Road America, which will be our final 60-minute race, before round 7 will take place on the 7th of March, where we'll be racing at the Daytona International Road Circuit, and that once again will be a 90-minute race. So that is a rundown of the calendar, as you can see there. Now, if we take a look at our previous race results from Watkins Glen in round 2, you can see the race results from the LMP3 class, where Ruddy Bird took the win with a total race time of 1 hour and 31 minutes, as you can see, and he took home the full 10 points from that race. Smolder picked up second, with Bo in third position, and the delta gaps that you're seeing there on the screen are between each driver individually rather than the gaps between the leader and the driver. So as you can see, Aid the Ace in fourth position finished 28 seconds behind Bo in P3, but Bizanchik in 5th place finished 6 seconds behind Aid the Ace. Inferno picked up P6, with Intergalactic Gentleman in his Ginetta picking up P7. Aaron picked up P8, with Minisco in P9 in his Ligier. And then Jay Peaches was the final LMP3 car to finish the race in P10. And Flaming Parrot, Logan, and a number of other drivers unfortunately didn't make it to see the checkered flag. But you can see the breakdown of the points there from the round as well, with Rudy Bird picking up 10 points, P2 with Smolder picking up 8, with Bo 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So it's effectively the top 8 positions that are taking home points in the LMP3 class. So with that, the update to the LMP3 Championship and the current standings. Aid the Ace is currently leading the way with 16 points, only 2 points ahead of Bo. In P3 in the Championship is Smolder with 13 points, 1 point behind Bo, with Roddy Bird picking up the 10 points from his race win in round 2, popping himself up into P4. Jeremy is there in P5, as you can see, with 7 points, with Bizanchik there in P6. Flaming Parrot comes in P7 currently with 4 points, only 1 point behind Bizanchik in front of him, with Martinez Maxime 3 points there, and basically tied for joint P8 with Inferno. Intergalactic Gentleman is there in P10, who is also joint P10 with Andrew Harper. And then Aaron is there listed in P12, and he is the final driver in the LMP3 class to have scored points in this championship season so far. There have been other drivers who have run in the championship, but none of them have yet to pick up any championship points. So coming on to the GT4 class and the race results from round 2 for the GT4 class there. M-Power picking up the win in his Ford Mustang Boss, and he picks up 16 points for taking that race win. Scott V came home in second place, so he's going to pick up 13 points, with Andrex, his teammate, coming home in P3 to pick up 11 points. Colonel McCoy, they're coming home in fourth, picking up 9 points. Dakuza in his BMW M3 GT4 is there, coming home in fifth position, with Neela there in sixth place. David Simon coming home in P7, picking up 6 points, with Marauder in P8, picking up 5 points. Carlito was coming home in ninth place, and then Milo was our final point scorer, coming home in 10th place. Now, Ticklish Picklewickle and Nahali would have picked up points if they finished the race, with TPW picking up, well, would have been picking up 2 points, and Gnarly would have been picking up 1 point if they did make the end of the race, but unfortunately they did not complete 90% of the race distance, and therefore have been classed as a did not finisher and score 0 points. So taking a look then at the updated championship standings for the GT4 class as they currently stand going into round 3. Scott is leading the way at the moment with a total of 30 points, with his teammate Andrex there in second place, 6 points behind him with a total of 24. Colonel McCoy is another further 6 points behind, currently in P3 in his Aston Martin, and then M-Power putting in the strong result last week, also taking pole position. He gets a bonus point for that, so he is there in P4 with a total of 17 points. P5 is currently held by Marauder and his KTM Expo with 13 points in total, with Braycheck not too far behind in P6, and Neela is also there, kind of joint P6, both Braycheck and Neela with 11 points in total. P8 sees Carlito, he is there with 10 points, and Dakuza in his M3 is in P9 with 8 points, and he is sharing that with Milo, who also has 8 points in his Aston Martin. Pushdom is in P11 with 7 points, and then David Simon is there in P12 with a total of 6 points, and then the only other driver who has picked up points so far this season is Ticklish Picklewickle, who managed to pick up 3 points so far from round 1, so he is there in 13th place, and then all the other drivers in the GT4 class have yet to score any points so far this season. So that is essentially a summary of the LMP3 and GT4 standings that we have so far in this IMSA Lights Endurance Series. We are just moments away from going live with the qualifying, and now we are just getting underway with the qualifying session. The guys have just loaded in, and a number of the drivers are coming out onto the circuit now. So we'll get into the coverage here, and we shall see who can get themselves up at the sharp end of the field for the start of this race, as one or two people struggling to navigate the exit of the pit lane here at Laguna Seca slightly. You see a trio of LMP3 cars there, 2 Ginettas either side of a Ligier, and in front further up the road we can also see a couple of the GT4 cars there as well. Here is one of them with M-Power there in his Ford Mustang Boss, sliding the car through turn 6 as he comes up the hill, the Rahal straight up towards the infamous corkscrew here at Laguna Seca. Both the prototypes and also the GT4 cars can handle the corkscrew perfectly fine, which is good to see. And hopefully, as I say, with the way that the track generally runs, the nice flow of the circuit with its 11 corners, the various different straights that it has, we'll see some great multi-class racing and hopefully some great battles within both the LMP3 and also the GT4 class as well. So let's take a look at Logan. He's there on his outlap, and we'll start flicking through the various drivers as they are beginning their laps. I know that F.O.O.L is currently on a flying lap, but he's got a little bit of GT4 traffic there that he needs to navigate as Empower's sliding around in the background in his Ford Mustang. If we jump to the roof cam and go on board with F.O.O.L as he flicks through into turn 4, just carrying the speed through, using the exit curb quite nicely. The gravel and sand and dirt is very close to the track edges and the edges of the curbs, so dipping your wheels beyond the curbs and beyond those white lines can potentially prove to be a little bit costly, as it's quite easy to get sucked in to the dirt, the dust and the gravel that's there on the edges of the track. And you see F.O.O.L is getting held up a little bit more by the LMP3 in front of him, who got caught out by the Aston Martin. This is one of the difficulties with the multi-class qualifying sessions with both classes out on track. It does provide entertainment for us though, as F.O.O.L goes and drops the wheels onto the gravel and loses control of the car before jumping back to the pits. So let's go and take a look at Aid the Ace, our current leader in the LMP3 class, who had a pretty strong race previous round. However, that was up to a certain point before he ran into issues. He had quite a bit of contact with another driver, if I recall correctly, which saw him having to go to the pit lane to pit for repairs and doing an extra stop in the race, one stop more than he wanted. But Aid the Ace has been very, very strong, so showing some very good pace. It seems like one of the fastest or faster drivers in the LMP3 class as he slips past the Aston Martin as he comes into the final corner now and accelerates out of that and across the start-finish line in just a moment. And he goes and pops himself up into pole position, 5.5 seconds ahead of Matt Cooley at the moment. However, that gap will close as Ruddy Bird does so, brings the gap to just under 3 seconds. Obviously, with a lot of the cars piling out onto the circuit as soon as the green light came on for the session. Obviously, there was a lot of traffic out and around the circuit. So, yeah, once the guys find a little bit of space out on track, they'll be able to pop in some faster lap times as Marco the Pirate goes and pops himself up into a provisional P2, only 100th of a second faster than Smolder in the Ginetta that we see there. We'll take a look at the GT4 cars. Scott is our current pole man in the GT4 class. He is currently trying to figure this out, about 3 seconds quicker than P2, who's currently held by Marauder in the KTM. It'll be interesting to see how the KTM fares around this circuit, as it's not so much of a power circuit. It relies on good stability through the corners, and the KTM, with its downforce and the stability that it has, should be pretty good at carrying its speed through the turns. The only place that it really struggle is kind of on the straights, potentially going up the hill towards the corkscrew, and they'll probably struggle in comparison to the Aston Martin. See if we can find where Empower is. He's currently there off the circuit, trying to get out of people's way at the moment in his Ford Mustang. It'll be interesting to see how that performs here in this qualifying session. At the moment he's currently qualified 11th in class, but obviously with the traffic he's trying to find himself a bit of space before putting in a representative lap time. Jump back up to the LMP3 field and up the front. Smolder has closed the gap to Aid the Ace with a 1:17.0. It's now only 1.3 seconds slower than Aid the Ace at the moment. And Logan actually just goes and pops himself up into 4th place, just ahead of Brzanczyk, who's got an LMP3 there for close company just in front of him, and then in front of him is Andrex in his Aston Martin. Andrex is currently qualifying in P3 at the moment, and hopefully, providing he doesn't get impaired by the LMP3s behind him too much, he should hopefully improve his lap time here on this, as the LMP3 almost goes to look to the inside and then thinks better of it. So we'll see if Andrax improves his lap this time around. His previous lap was a 128.5, and he does, but only by a 100th of a second. So there wasn't a real improvement there for Andrax. But things are looking pretty close up the front of the GT4 field. Top three separated by half a second, and there's a bit more of a gap to Marauder in his KTM. So let's have a look at some of the other LMP3 drivers. Ready Bird there, coming up towards the corkscrew, looking up the apex quite nicely, and not taking any liberties, dropping down the dip to the second apex in the right-hander. Menisco is there, and is Ligier currently in P7 in this qualifying session. He'll be looking to improve, as I believe that was Jeremy there in the background that was going straight into the wall. Jeremy actually qualified on pole position in the previous race at Watkins Glen, and he had a phenomenal start to begin with. He managed to eke out about 5 car lengths over the other LMP3 cars before getting to turn 1, but unfortunately for Jeremy, on the exit of turn 1 he did end up spinning and losing the car. So that lead that he had was very short-lived, as he did end up dropping to the back of the LMP3 field, and later on he ended up retiring from the race after having some contact with a couple of other drivers. Hopefully this time Jeremy will have a bit better luck, and we'll see him back up there at the sharp end of the field. Smolder seems to be improving his pace in this qualifying session, as he gets a little bit sideways there, going through turn 5, coming up to turn 6, a very fast left-handed kink, but he's now within 8 tenths of a second of Aid the Ace, currently holding P2, skirting and carving his way through the traffic, launching the car off down through the corkscrew, taking a very nice line that through Rainy Curve. He does have a BMW in front of him of Dacusa, but Dacusa does move quite nicely out of the way and doesn't impede Smolder. Coming into the final turn, using plenty of curb on the exit there. Smolder will be coming across the line now. Will he improve on his lap time? He does, by a 1/10 of a second. So that gap at the front is diminishing a little bit. Bozanchik is going to come across the line. Will he improve on his lap time? He does, however he does not improve on his position, still holding P3, as we've got just under 5 minutes remaining in this qualifying session. Marco the Pirate is coming towards the last couple of corners of the lap. He currently has his lights turned off, which could indicate that he is not on a flying lap. There you go, he's turning his lights on now. Just as he comes into the final corner, he does move out quite nicely out of the way of one of the other LMP3 drivers as well. And Marco the Pirate will be beginning his flying lap. Drivers have been instructed to have their lights on when they are on a hot flying lap, and to have their lights switched off when they are not. And with that, the guys are able to obviously determine who is on a lap and who isn't, and work out the space that they need for their lap to avoid getting impeded by another driver, as Bo goes and pops himself up into 4th place, improving on his lap time to a 118.232. And just as I say that, Jeremy goes and pops himself up into 3rd place with a 117.1. Now there is a little bit of damage on the front of Jeremy's car, but I think him going back to the pit lane would have repaired that, and that is not actually representative of the current car state for Jeremy, although that will be representative as he goes and dips the wheels out onto the dirt and out onto the gravel, and ends up spinning round, and obviously ruins any chance of improving his lap time that time round. I'm seeing a few drivers do have grid place penalties, Bo being one of them. Aaron is also another, and then Peaches also has a single grid place penalty. That'll probably be for speeding in the pit lane. Hopefully no other drivers will pick up any penalties. So at the moment, Bo with his current position in these final 2 minutes and 40 odd seconds is holding a net 6th place because of that grid penalty that he currently has. So let's go and take a look back at the front of the GT4 field. Scott is still on a provisional pole position at the moment. D'Couza in his M3 has got himself up into 2nd place ahead of Scott's teammate Andrex. Empower has managed to put his Ford up into 4th place in class, with Marauder now down in 5th place in the GT4 class. Brake check in his Aston Martin is currently holding 6th, with Nyla there in 7th place. P8 is currently held by Dave Alex, and then Ticklish Picklewickle, TPW, has been more commonly referred to him as, is there in 9th place in class with his Toyota GT86. Hopefully TPW can have less issues this time around. He had a couple of incidents with lag, as he comes very close there to making contact with the Ginetta that was sliding past him. But yeah, had a couple of incidents with lag. He suffered a fair amount of damage and ended up retiring from the race previously in round 2. Carlito, there's our last GT4 driver, currently in P10. He's coming across the line now. His lights would indicate that he is on a hot lap, however he has not improved his lap time. So let's take a look at the back of the LMP3 field, and Peaches is currently the driver 15th in class. He does not improve his lap time this time round. 14th is currently held by Flaming Parrot. Bonetto is currently in 13th. 12th is Minnesota, but he's in the pit, so he's not going to improve on his lap time. Aaron is coming through the penultimate turn now, currently holding P11. We shall continue to watch Aaron as he comes through the final turn to see if he will improve on his lap time and his position. He's only a 10th off Roddy Bird in front of him. However, he does not improve his lap time. However, he will get one more opportunity to try and improve his qualifying position. Roddy Bird, as I said, is there in P10. Flaming Parrot has managed to get himself now up into P9. And Matt Cooley is there in the pits in P8, so he's not going to get any better than that. Neither is Logan in P7. P6, Marco the Pirate also in the pit lane. Bazanchik is out on circuit at the moment. He's going to get one more opportunity as he's just come across the line with just a few seconds to spare. So this will be the final lap for him. He's currently holding P5. Bo is in the pit, so he's going to be in P5. Will be his best starting position. Smolder in P3 with Jeremy getting himself up into 2nd place, only a 10th and a half off of Aid the Ace, our current poleman, who's also in the pit lane. Smolder is the next driver to come across the start-finish line to complete his lap, currently holding P3. Accelerating up through the gears and coming across the line. Will he improve on his lap time? He does not. So that is session over for Smolder. Bazanchik is coming up towards the corkscrew. Let's take a quick look at the GT4s. Empower's finished, has managed to get himself up into 2nd ahead of D'Couza, who I believe is still on a flying lap. And Drex has just come through the 2nd to last turn and is diving to the pit lane, so he'll be starting no better than P4. Marauder's finished his lap time, so let's jump back to Bazanchik, as he is one of the final drivers to be coming across the start-finish line here in this qualifying session for round 3. Will he improve on his current P5? He does not, but I do believe he did improve his lap time. So here is your classification for the LMP3. Aid the Ace on pole with Jeremy 2nd, Smolder 3rd, Bo 4th, Bazanchik 5th, Marco the Pirate in 6th place, Logan 7th, Flaming Parrot in 8th with Matt Cooley 9th, Roddy Bird in 10, Aaron in 11th place, Minisco in 12th, Intergalactic Gentleman P13, P14 was Bonetto, and Jay Peaches rounds out the LMP3 field in P15. Pole for the GT4s goes to Scott with Empower in 2nd, D'Couza 3rd, Andrex 4th, Marauder 5th, Brake Check 6th, Neela 7th, Dave Alex in 8th, TPW in P9, and then Carlito will round out our 10-car grid in the GT4 class. So here we go then, transitioning into the race session. Now the drivers get a short 2-minute period just to get themselves ready and prepared for the race. They'll be double checking their pit strategies if they are needed for this race, which I don't think they will need to, as it is only 60 minutes and the LMP3 cars in round 1 at Circuit of the Americas were able to complete the race without a pit stop needing any fuel. And likewise with the GT4 cars, they also have a fuel tank that is sufficient enough to go the distance as well. So I don't think we'll be seeing any scheduled or planned pit stops. The only pit stops that we will be seeing is probably for any damage and any potential change of tyres, but I don't think the drivers will be needing to change tyres in this race either. This 2-minute opportunity does also give the chance for the drivers to double check their car setup as well, make sure that that is all good for the race, and obviously just prepare themselves, take a few nice deep breaths, soak in the atmosphere and get ready for our rolling start that we do here in AOR. It's a little bit different to the standing start. The drivers will not be going on the green light, even though we will have the green light countdown instead. The drivers will sit there on the grid for a couple of seconds before slowly pulling away, where they will drive around the circuit at no more than 120 kilometers per hour, 80 miles per hour in a single file train. And then once it gets to a certain point around the back section of the circuit, just after the corkscrew, the drivers will form up in a 2x2 formation, very similar to what is seen on the grid just here. And there, the drivers, as we see a little lagging car there in the background, yeah, drivers will form up into 2 trains, 2x2, in their starting positions. The speed will be reduced down to 80 kilometers per hour, 50 miles an hour. And then once they come out of the final turn, the race leader in both classes, so Aid the Ace and Scott, will signify the race start by putting their foot to the firewall in the cockpit of the cars on the accelerator pedal, and obviously accelerate away, at which point all other drivers will react to that and the race will begin from there. So the guys are just on their formation lap at the moment. See Aid the Ace there and a number of other drivers doing a little bit of tyre warming. If we bring up the track map, you can see the LMP3 field and the GT4 field starting to spread themselves out a little bit. We also bring up the speedo as well. It's quite useful for getting an indicator as to the amount of fuel that the drivers are using, and also their general throttle and braking inputs. So you can see there, Aid the Ace has currently got 85 litres of fuel there or thereabouts. Same with Jeremy. A lot of the other guys seem to be in and around that amount, so I imagine that is probably the maximum fuel capacity for the LMP3 cars. And if we take a look at the GT4 cars, Scott's got a little bit more, 87. M-Power's playing it pretty safe with 94. Dakuza with 84. Andrex is running 92 litres. So there's a little bit of differentiation there in the GT4 class in terms of fuel loads. But here we can see the LMP3 field bunching up into that 2x2 formation. They're coming through the final turn in the 2 trains, and then any time between now and the start finish line, Aid the Ace will be able to put his foot flat to the floor to signify the start of the race. We will watch Smolder as they come across the line now, and we are now racing. Bo having a look at a little bit of a good start there as Aid the Ace is pulling away a couple of car lengths. Bo knocking out a couple of cones as they come on the run down towards turn 1. Hopefully the drivers can keep it fairly clean coming through in the 2 trains. A couple of cars going side by side, but so far looking pretty good. If we go and jump to the GT4 field just to see what their start is like, pretty similar fashion to the LMP3 cars. However, Empower seems to be a little bit closer to Scott than Jeremy was to the Ace. Coming into turn 1, Andrex flying down the outside of Dakusa. There's a little bit of contact there as Marauder, that wasn't Marauder, sorry, that was one of the other KTMs coming into the back and making contact with Dakusa. That's very unfortunate for him. A number of drivers are probably going to incur some damage with that. It was Neela who made contact with him, and Neela does the right thing of waiting for Dakusa to come back ahead, but that damage looks pretty significant to the back of Dakusa's car. And Marauder was slightly caught up in that as well, as TPW has managed to get himself up into 5th in class and has got a Aston Martin on his outside. If we jump back up to the front of the field with the LMP3 cars as they come through the final turn already to finish or put an end to the first racing lap. The Ace currently holding a gap of about 3 to 4 tenths at the moment over Jeremy as he takes a couple of brake marker boards in the braking zone for turn 1. Bo's got close company with Brzanczek behind, and then behind them the LMP3 field is starting to spread out a little bit more as well. Scott has got Andrex for company pretty close behind, and Empower has managed to get himself up into the lead of the GT4 class, so there's been a change of position there at the front of the GT4 field, and they seem to be pulling away quite substantially from the rest of the GT3 cars. It was Dakusa who did start in 3rd place and had Andrex around his outside, but with the contact between Neela and Dakusa, that did back up the rest of the GT4 cars a little bit more, hence the gap that we're seeing here between Braketrack and Andrex in front of him, 4.5 seconds at the moment. Dakusa seems to be pressing on with that damage that he has at the rear of the car. Obviously we don't have any idea as to how substantial that damage is. It just looks like he's got a fair amount on the rear of his car, as the 2 KTM Crossbows have not really had the start that they were hoping for, as they are down towards the tail end of the field. And Ticklish Picklewicker has also had some issues on the previous lap, it would seem, as he has dropped to the back of the GT4 field, but he does have the 2 KTMs there just in front of him, not too far away, and quite nicely there within his sights. Jeremy has gone and lost P2 to Bo. Bo's managed to gain a couple of positions and slot himself up into 2nd place now. There may have been a couple of cars struggling a little bit. Brzanczek there in 4th place, and then Marco the Pirate in 5th, with Smolder now down into 6th position. Aaron is not too far behind Matt Cooley at the moment. It's holding that gap just underneath a 2nd, with Bernetto and Intergalactic Gentleman, similar sort of gap with Flaming Parrot, then also behind in 11th place. Bernetto currently holding P10 in the LMP3 class. Minesco is there, pretty close to his teammate Peaches in front. Battle for 12th and 13th position as they come into the corkscrew. Riding on board, you can see the dramatic change in elevation there as they drop down through the corkscrew and then come down into this fast, long, sweeping left-hander. Pretty late apex, and then they come round through the penultimate turn. Both corners very nicely cambered, that helps you to hook in towards the apex, and then the rather tricky final turn. It's quite easy to run a little bit deep and to run a little bit wide upon the exit. Jump back up to the front of the GT4 field, and Scott has managed to get himself back up in front of Empower once again. Andrex is still very much there in the fight as well. So very, very close here at the front of the GT4 cars. It's great to see Andrex looking like he's trying to threaten Empower a little bit slightly into the final turn. Instead though, Andrex is trying to line himself up for a better exit, coming out of that final turn across the start-finish line. And the best overtaking opportunity here is into the braking zone of turn 2, the Andretti hairpin. Oh no, as Scott goes and loses the car, Empower's gone deep, as Empower's going to make contact with Scott as well. That was very unfortunate for Empower. I don't think Empower, in his mistake of running deep, quite realised that Scott was losing control until it was a little bit too late. That's going to be quite substantial damage to the front of Empower's car. Scott's got quite a bit of damage to the side of his as well. Scott there with the innocent mistake. Same with Empower, really. There wasn't really too much that either driver could have done that, other than obviously not making the mistakes that they did end up making. But yeah, that's gone and gifted P1 to Andrex, slotting himself up into the lead. And depending on how much power, how much damage that Empower and Scott actually have, this could be Andrex's opportunity to run away with this race a little bit, especially if Empower and Scott do actually have to make a pit stop and repair any damage that they have. Yakuza there in the M4 has managed to recover, M3 has managed to recover himself back up into P4. We'll watch Empower and also Scott though to see if they will take to the pit lane. They do not. Scott was having a little bit of a think about it, but seeing that Empower in front of him was not taken to the pit lane, has decided about going into the pits himself, and instead both drivers are going to try and endure the damage that they have, see how long they can go in this race, and try not to concede too many positions, because obviously with drivers not planning on actually making any pit stops, actually going into the pits to repair any damage is going to lose them an awful lot of time. And you can see here Aid the Ace and the other LMP3 cars are actually starting to make their way through the the GT4 traffic now. Scott goes around the outside of brake check there. Sorry, Bo goes around the outside of brake check there. Bo currently holding 4th position, not too far away from Jeremy in front, who had to go wide, trying to go around the outside of Yakuza. This is giving Bo the opportunity to have to look inside, but Jeremy defends that well and shuts that door off. Did also see Scott having some troubles and some issues spinning off the circuit as well. He's now dropped down into 7th place. Obviously that damage being fairly significant, although he's having a little bit of a look at Dave Alex coming up in towards turn 6. It's not really a corner that you can go too wide in, and Scott has managed to get the position. It seems like Dave Alex has unfortunately dropped from the session. That is a shame to see. Oh no, just as we come and collect up Bo. Bo has gone and dropped the car coming through in towards the second to last turn. He's now having to wait on track for a space to get himself to rejoin safely. There may have been a little bit of contact between Jeremy and Bo, not entirely sure. They were pretty close together on track, and Bo may have just been having a bit of a look at Jeremy. As we see, Yakuza is there in the wall on the exit of the final turn as well. Seems like a number of drivers are having all sorts of issues. As we see here, Scott is going around the outside of Marauder. Bo's trying to obviously put a lap on these guys. He's trying to do it carefully, obviously. 2 GT4 cars that he is trying to pass here are both battling for position, as Bo does rub door panels slightly with Scott. And I've just also seen there in the background Empower coming out of the pit lane. He's been in to make a pit stop, obviously to repair that damage that's gone and dropped him down into 6th position within the GT4 class. Scott is not too far up the road in P3. Scott is driving with that damage still, as he is getting lapped by one of the LMP3 cars there in front of him. Yeah, jumping back up to the LMP3 leaders, Aid the Ace has now got a 5.5 second lead over Jeremy in P2, who has a 7-second gap to Brzdanczyk there in the other Ligier behind him. Bo obviously trying to work his way back up through the field after the mistake. Does get the position here on Marco the Pirate, as Marco the Pirate runs a little bit wide on the exit of the penultimate turn, which gifts that 5th position to Bo. It'll be interesting to see the lap times of Bo, to see what kind of pace he has over Jeremy and ADS, the guys who he was battling previously. So let's jump back to the GT4 cars as they are battling away. Scott has managed to close up on towards the back of brake check there in front of him. He's got the gap down to 0.6 of a second, still holding 3rd position in class, as Andrex is romping away with a 17.5 second lead over brake check at the moment after Scott's spin that he had, and Empower obviously making his pit stop, providing that Andrex can keep the car clean, not push too much. He should run away with this win as the LMP3 car is there spinning in the background. Marauder having to take avoiding action, did a very good job there of avoiding making contact with that LMP3 car, as we're seeing brake check and Scott going side by side on the run up towards the corkscrew. Scott managing to slot himself up into third position though, despite the damage that he may have on the front of his car, which just ended, just a clear indicator of the pace that Scott has in that Aston Martin. Brake check conceding the position and going down into P3, but Marauder's certainly picked up the pace and has closed up towards the back as he's got two LMP3 cars there for pretty close company behind, which they should both pass him quite easily here on this start-finish straight, as the Ligier there of, I think that may have been, it wasn't Marco de Parrot, sorry, Flaming Parrot, it was Flaming Parrot, coming very close to the pit wall on the right-hand side of the circuit. He goes very nicely around the outside of brake check there, as Manesco goes past Scott. Flaming Parrot will follow him through on driver's right. So the battle for ninth position hasn't really been affected too much by that traffic. We jump to Dakuza, very close to the back of M-Power. He's got an LMP3 splitting the two at the moment, but the LMP3 will slot himself ahead of M-Power coming into the very fast turn 6 kink there. And M-Power, like he ran a little bit wide on the exit of that turn, which does hurt your momentum coming up the hill. Dakuza coming pretty close, under braking into the corkscrew, and that is going to be 5th position for Dakuza as M-Power struggled with the traction upon exit, had to wrestle with the car, did manage to keep it out of the wall, sorry, but in doing so has gone and lost the position to Dakuza in front of him and drops down into 6th place as he's now got the LMP3 coming up his inside into the final turn. We've got a driver there who has retired to the pits there in the pit lane. Unfortunately, I cannot see who that driver actually is. Let's jump up to the LMP3 battles. Flaming Parrot still chasing down Manesco, but although has gained time on the previous lap, has seemed to have dropped off the back of Manesco a little bit in the opening sector of this lap. Marauder right on the tail of brake check as they're getting some company with some LMP3 drivers. Marauder having a little bit of a look to the inside of brake check, but brake check defends that inside line coming into turn 5. LMP3 spinning off ahead of them, not really affecting them too much. That Janetta sliding himself between the two and will get past before we get to the kink here, but Marauder with the better run through turn 6 is trying to claw himself up alongside, coming up towards the corkscrew. It's braking a little bit later than the Aston Martin. They're coming very, very close to the rear quarter of that Aston in front of him. Somehow does manage to avoid making contact. Will continue to follow the Aston of brake check through at the moment, but he's got a little bit of a run here, looking to the inside. There is a bit of an overlap. He's going for that inside move, coming through the penultimate turn, giving him a little bit of racing room, but also a bit of a squeeze on the exit there, and that is Marauder up into 3rd position ahead of brake check. This is allowing Dakuza to also close the gap back up to this battle for the podium position here in the GT4 class, but the Aston Martin is now coming back at the KTM as they come in towards turn 2. Marauder though got the inside line, surely going to be able to hold on to the position here. Dakuza has wanted to try and cash in as we got an LMP3 coming out the pit lane here, right in amongst all this squabbling and all these cars. He gets well out of it though and tries to stay clear of all these drivers, not to impede them. There's a bit of a contact there between the two drivers, that is Logan and also Bonetto. Bonetto's actually gone and lost control of the car, getting up onto the gravel and onto the dirt, and has gone and made contact with the wall, and he is unfortunately retired from the session after that contact. But yeah, all the action kicking off here in round 3 in and amongst the LMP3 and GT4 cars, lapping as Dakuza goes and runs wide on the exit of turn 6 there. That is going to hurt his momentum coming up the hill, surely going to allow M-Power to close up a little bit. Brake check is still there right on the rear tail of Marauder, has Ligier for pretty close company. Currently on board, riding with the Cruiser at the moment. As they come through into turn 10, there are a couple of LMP3 cars lurking behind there. You can see them. I think one of them may be Jeremy. It is the Ace has also managed to claw his way through this pack as well. You can see him there off in the distance. That's one of the other LMP3 drivers as Jeremy goes and slots himself between the Cruiser and brake check, giving a flash of the lights to Logan, I believe that is, and the Ginetta in front of him. Obviously wanting to get past us. The Cruiser's actually having a look down the inside into turn 2 of brake check. Has managed to get that move done. There's a Ginetta there having a slight spin as the LMP3 drivers are trying to work their way through the field of Ginetta GT4 cars, or the various GT4 cars, sorry, without trying to impact their races too much. But in doing so, it is kind of impacting their races. This is fantastic battling that we are seeing here as M-Power is having a look down the inside of brake check coming into turn 5. Isn't quite able to get his nose up alongside though, and instead is going to follow him through. He's going to be hoping for a good run through turn 6. Here is Marauder and also the Cruiser up in front of us have a pretty poor run, both running out wide. That's going to cost them momentum coming up the hill. Brake check closing up on them, but has to get on the brakes early to avoid making contact with either of the two drivers up in front. As the Cruiser is there, having level look down the inside now of Marauder coming into the fast sweeping long left-hander. It looks like he's managed to get his car alongside the KTM, conceding the position for now, dropping back into 4th place. Brake check there, looking all over the back of the KTM now, having a little bit of a look to the inside. Will he be able to get the move actually done? It looks like he is. Brake check has managed to get himself now up into 4th place as Marauder is very much on the back foot and is surely going to be under heavy pressure coming into the braking zone of turn 2 from M-Power. Marauder going defensive, defending that inside line, forcing M-Power to the outside, but the KTM is much better on the brakes, is able to hold on to that 5th position at the moment. But Marauder losing a couple of positions there in the sequence of a few turns, dropping from 4th place down to 5th, but he is not completely out of it yet. He's still there within a car length of Marauder, of brake check in front of him. The Cruiser though, who has managed now to get himself back up into 3rd place, has managed to eke out a little bit of a gap as we see M-Power there. Again, having a look down the inside of Marauder. This is where Marauder seems to have the legs over the other drivers, is through these couple of turns 5 and turn 6. As again he runs wide as he tries to carry the speed through, running in the dirty air of that Aston Martin in front of him, as he's got a Ligier and M-Power for company. I believe that is Logan and the Ginetta sliding up the inside, coming down through the corkscrew. That's gone and actually hindered Marauder a little bit as he's now kind of lost touch to brake check in front of him. He's lost a few car lengths, however, with the LMP3 car trying to get his way past the Aston Martin, could also potentially hold up the Aston Martin as well, although the LMP3 does get past under the acceleration there. And there you can see Bo as well wanting to come past. That's actually allowed M-Power to slot himself up into 5th place. Marauder losing the position there, not really able to defend. However, M-Power's gone deep into turn 2. Marauder retaking that 5th position. This is absolutely fantastic racing that we're seeing here in round 3 in the GT4 field. This is what multi-class racing is all about, as M-Power is all over the back of Marauder once again. Marauder shutting the door though in turn 4, not allowing M-Power to get past, although M-Power's got the legs over Marauder coming down the straight in towards turn 5 and gets the move done around the outside before Marauder was really able to try and defend the position and hold off against him. As the LMP3, Marauder is going to have to ease off a little bit more than he would like to avoid running into the back of the LMP3 there. Coming through turn 6, now M-Power would have to do the same, coming into the corkscrew, which is allowing Marauder to close up towards the back of the Mustang once again. And we see Jeremy here now, P2 in the LMP3 field, is within a second of Aid the Ace. Aid the Ace was 1.2 seconds slower on the previous lap. Must be either due to traffic or a slight mistake from Aid the Ace. Aid the Ace did have quite a good lead of around about 5 seconds earlier on in the race, but we saw that gap diminish once they actually came to the GT4 traffic. It's just the way the multi-class racing here works, with the ebbs and flows of the slower classes. Sometimes it works against you, sometimes it works in your favour and you're able to pull further away from your competitors. And in this case, Jeremy has benefited from the traffic whilst Aid the Ace has lost out. And Jeremy now within half a second of Aid the Ace. It certainly seems like he has the measure over the current leader at this stage in the race. Having a little bit of a look to the inside, coming very close to the back, of almost making contact there. I think there may have been a slight tap between the two. Jeremy going into a little bit of a half spin, does recover back in front of the lap down LMP3 Ginetta car that we can see there in the foreground. Aid the Ace goes around the outside of the GT4 there. Oh, Jeremy taking just a bit too much speed there through turn 4, going wide onto the gravel. It's obviously through frustration after the mistake right behind Aid the Ace. Very unfortunate, but we'll have to try and keep an eye on Jeremy to see if he will close up towards the rear of the LMP3 leaders. And it was Andrex that I saw coming out of the pit lane there in the background whilst picking up Bo coming out through turn 2. Andrex has got a lot of damage to the front of his car, and he is at the back of the GT4 field. He's obviously had an issue somewhere along the line, a potential mistake, or could potentially have been a collision with an LMP3 driver, or even potentially another GT4 driver. But Andrex coming out the pit lane obviously to repair damage, but that is actually put him almost a lap down on his teammate Scott, who after the contact with Empower, when Empower hit Scott whilst Scott was having his unfortunate half spin, is now back up into the lead of the GT4 class. He's rumped away from Dakuza, who's got a gap of 10 seconds to Dakuza in his BMW, who has about a 3.5 second gap over Empower in his Ford, and Brake Check is there currently in 4th place, roughly lurking around about a second behind Empower, as he's got the LMP3 coming up and sliding down his inside into turn 10. Marauder there, not too far behind, about a 1.5 seconds. So that battle that we were seeing for those podium positions in the GT4 class have spread out. But yeah, that's very, very unfortunate for Andrex, seeing him coming out the pit lane in dead last in class and only just ahead of his teammate. Hopefully he's still on the same lap. Not entirely sure how much time he did lose in the pit lane, but Nila is his next target, but he is 31.5 seconds as we see Smolder there, I think that was, having a spin. Where is Smolder? There he is, currently in 3rd place in class, about 19-20 seconds behind Jeremy at the moment. But yeah, Smolder just dipping the wheels, running a little bit wide on the exit of turn 10, just sending his Ginetta around, although he does manage to rejoin the track without picking up any contact, it seems. We can see there Nila and also Ticklish Pickerwickle as well, having a little bit of a battle between those two drivers. TPW having a little bit of a look there to the inside of Nila coming into turn 3, didn't quite work. He's got the Ginetta there of Smolder though coming up the inside of both of them. It's not going to impede either of them coming through turn 4 though, so that's worked pretty good. And yeah, it seems like TPW is struggling a little bit in comparison to the KTM and is dropping back. Here we can see Bo in the now background of the shot, wanting to work his way past. He's being quite patient there, getting past TPW at the right opportunity, and is again going to be patient and sit behind the KTM of Nila, and then pop down his inside coming into the fast sweeping turn 9 of Rainy Curve. Doesn't quite actually able to do that. He's going around the outside of into turn 10 though. Jumping back up to the front of the field once again. Jeremy, really the man on the move at the moment as he's got the pace. He's got a little bit of a run. Don't look to that side of the Aston Martin there. The Aston Martin was moving a crossover. That's going to cost Jeremy a little bit of momentum, but he took 1 second out of Aid the Ace on the previous lap with a 117.9 to Aid the Ace's 118.9. So Jeremy certainly the stronger of the two Ligiers at the moment. We've got ourselves a fight for P1 overall in the race and first in the LMP3 class. So we'll stick with these two guys as Aid the Ace goes down the inside of M-Power, and Jeremy also follows. They'll clear him before getting to 10 quite easily. The Kuza is the next car as Aid the Ace is having a look to the inside in the final turn. The Kuza giving room, Jeremy trying to follow him through as well. Jeremy will have the slipstream here coming down the start finish straight. Will he mount a challenge coming into turn 2? This is turn 1 here that they're going through. He's having a look to the outside. He's trying to sive down the outside, braking a little bit later, running a little bit deep though. Don't think he's going to quite be able to hang it around the outside, but he is going to bring it back in quite nicely. Get the good run coming off of turn 2 in towards turn 3. Having a look round the outside there. Aid the Ace is going to have to give him racing room, which he does so. Jeremy dipping a couple of wheels out onto the gravel. It's going to cost him a little bit of momentum, and that's going to drop him back in behind Aid the Ace. But once again, it seems like Jeremy's carrying a little bit more corner speed on the exit. He's got the inside line coming here into turn 5. Both of them going side by side. Nice fair battling that we're seeing. Both being very fair, giving each other plenty of room. This is going to be a very difficult opportunity though to go side by side. May have been a tiny little bit of contact there between the two, but it seemed like that was more lag than anything, as it looked like the two drivers were holding a good line through the corner. But that is Jeremy now up into P1. Aid the Ace running wide there through turn 6, will concede the position into turn 2. But now the cards go to Aid the Ace's hands, and it'll be on him to see if he can hold the pace that Jeremy has been setting the last few laps. See if he can stick with Jeremy and see if he can challenge back for that race lead, or will Jeremy actually accelerate away and pull a gap to Aid the Ace. And one thing that I'm actually just realizing here and noticing is actually Aid the Ace's throttle inputs, they're not quite going up to 100% throttle. You can see that it's slightly smoothed out when it comes to the gear shifts and getting onto the accelerator coming out of corners, but even on the straights he's not getting up to 100% throttle. If we watch Aid the Ace, watch Jeremy here, it doesn't seem like he's getting up to 100% throttle either. So I think that could just be the speedo. Nope, Marco the Pirate though is getting up to 100% throttle. So could that potentially be an issue for Aid the Ace that is costing him power here? Maybe he's not quite able to get up to his full racing speed, or alternatively they could be running different fuel mixtures here, which could be limiting their total amount of throttle input. There you can see Jeremy now using max throttle. Previously he wasn't when he was behind Andrex there. As he goes around the outside, Aid the Ace has managed to close the gap up now. I think it may have just been the guys running different fuel mixtures, just trying to preserve the fuel loads a little bit and make it last. As we see Logan there on the outside of the final turn, recovering back onto the circuit. Yeah, I think that could be the reason why we're seeing Aid the Ace not quite reaching max throttle, and why Jeremy was using even less whilst still accelerating previously. There you can see again he's using even less throttle than what we've been seeing from Aid the Ace, so perhaps he's switching down to a lean fuel mixture to try and use less fuel now that he is there in the race lead. Obviously Aid the Ace seems to be running a little bit more in terms of the fuel mixture, so he's probably on the normal fuel map, which is allowing him to use a little bit more throttle, and then Smolder is probably on the rich mixture, which is why we're seeing 100% throttle coming from him. And Bo actually as well, seeming like he's running an alternative fuel mixture to the default rich fuel mixture. The rich fuel mixture is the one that the game defaults to, but you can change it in the ICM menu. It does allow you to try and preserve a little bit of fuel by limiting the amount of effectively throttle input. It just manages that and allows you to save a few points of a litre, shall I say, per lap. Obviously lifting and coasting is also another effective method to try and save fuel in this race. Let's go and have a look at the GT4 cars, as it's been a while since we visited these, and M-Power seem to have closed up towards the back of the Kuza. Kuza currently holding P2 at the moment, with M-Power lurking 4 tenths of a second behind at the moment. There's a gap about 10 seconds to Scott ahead of the Kuza, and then behind it seems like Marauder and Brake Check have dropped further off, but Marauder is there on the back of Brake Check once again. So we've got two battles here in the GT4 class that we need to try and keep an eye on. For the moment, it's very hard to pick who we shall watch. Let's stick with M-Power for the moment and the Kuza. Be interesting to see the performance difference between the Ford Mustang Boss and the BMW M3. The M3 using a H-pattern gearbox and seems to be quite slow in the gear shifts when using an automatic clutch. If you do have a H-pattern shifter though and you use manual clutch, you can work around the amount of time that it takes to perform a gear shift and obviously negate that disadvantage which the M3 has. M-Power and the Ford Mustang Boss though will have, I imagine, the better straight line speed, also using a H shifter with the manual clutch. As you'll see, he'll brake here and then he'll drop it from 5th gear down into 2nd for the corner that he actually needs. So he's not heel toeing down through the gears, instead he's just skipping gears down into the gear that he actually needs, changing down when he needs to, which means that he will be actually riding on the clutch during the braking zone once the revs drop and through the corner until he changes into the gear that he actually wants, which is an interesting tactic. Something also pretty interesting that I've just realised. The Ace is back into the lead. Jeremy is unfortunately nowhere to be seen. Not that I could see on my leaderboard anyway. He was previously leading, so I'm not entirely sure what has happened there. Don't know whether he's retired from the race or whether he had a disconnection issue, but we're now down to 20 drivers in total. 12 in the LMP3 field from our starting 15 and 8 GT4 cars from our starting 10. But yeah, the Ace now back up into the lead and has got an 12 second lead over Bo, who's currently up in 2nd place. He's now got himself ahead of Smolder and Marco the Pirate there in 4th place. As we're also seeing Aaron in the pit lane. That could be Jeremy's card there that we see kind of lagging and glitching out in the pit lane. So I think Jeremy may have ended up retiring from the race for whatever reason. That was very unfortunate because he was obviously fighting there up at the front, and it was looking like a very interesting battle. We're seeing Hugo in the chat there saying that Jeremy has unfortunately retired because he got caught up in an incident with Hugo. So that's very unfortunate to see that, and to see both drivers out of the race and retiring as well. We're currently on board at the moment with M-Power as he's closing up on the back of the Kuza, which I say lurking there and thereabouts. Smolder though in P3 has got within a second of Bo in the LMP3 class. 22.5 minutes remaining in this race. It is far from over yet at the moment, and anything can happen. But as we've seen so far, the race has provided some great, fantastic action and some brilliant battling between a number of drivers. Just hoping that the action does continue here with F.O.O.L and Yakuza in the GT4 class. We've now just gone underneath the 22-minute mark, and at the moment F.O.O.L has got 43 litres of fuel remaining. Yakuza on 38.3, as you can see that on the right hand side of the screen. So those two guys should get to the end quite comfortably. Let's take a look at the LMP3 cars and see how much fuel they've got. 34 litres for 8th the Ace. Bo has again just over 34 litres as he styles his way around the outside of Logan, I believe that was. Smolder also with 34 litres. 35 for Marco the Pirate. Menesco is on 35, 34. So it seems like the LMP3 cars, apart from Brzanczek, who's got 39, are all in and around the same sort of ballpark area in terms of their fuel load remaining for this race. We saw 8th the Ace and Jeremy, when he was running, doing some fuel saving. Let's jump back up to this battle in the GT4 class between F.O.O.L and Yakuza for second place in class. Get lapped by one of the Legias. F.O.O.L though having a look to the outside of Yakuza coming into turn 2. This could be F.O.O.L running deep though, and Yakuza holding on to the position quite comfortably, it would seem. F.O.O.L certainly seems to have the legs over a lot of his competitors in terms of straight line speed, but keeps running deep, making a mistake on the brakes into turn 2, which does hamper his potential of making the move stick there, but in doing so he does kind of quite nicely line himself up for a decent exit and does allow him to stay close for the next few corners. As we can see, it's relatively close here to the back of Yakuza, 2.5 tenths of a second, as Yakuza has a very slight slide there through turn 6, ever so slightly dips the wheels out onto the gravel. F.O.O.L was closing up a little bit there before they got to the brakes. Yakuza though running a little bit deep, having to wrestle with the car slightly as the car was wiggling around just as they were coming into the turning point for the entry to the corkscrew. Yakuza obviously playing safe and giving him ample room, has lost a car length or two because of that. And there you can see once again under braking into the final turn, F.O.O.L closing up. This could give F.O.O.L the run on Yakuza coming down the start-finish straight, coming up in towards turn 1, which isn't really a turn. Is he going to look to the outside once again? He is. Is he going to run deep though? He is slightly, but again it's going to pull himself back for a better exit than Yakuza. Slight feint to the inside there, faking the move, making sure that Yakuza is looking rearwards in his mirrors. And F.O.O.L having a better run through that corner. This could give him the momentum. He's having a look to the outside as Yakuza is going defensive to the inside on turn 5. This will be a brilliant move if F.O.O.L can make the move stick around the outside here. It doesn't look like he will be able to do so. Instead, he's going to slot back in behind Yakuza once again as they come in through turn 6. Both drivers having a pretty clean run through this time round as they come uphill, up in towards the corkscrew, riding on board in the cockpit of F.O.O.L. This is what the corkscrew looks like for the drivers. The second part, the right hand of the apex, is pretty much completely blind. You cannot see it. You usually just have to kind of learn the track, learn it from memory and pick up some reference points, and with that position the car just right so you drop right down onto the apex of the turn. As you drop down through the corkscrew into the right-hander, Marauder has managed to get himself past brake check up into 4th place and has got himself a good 5.5 to 6 second gap now between the two. Andrex is still running and is running roughly about 3 seconds a lap quicker than Ticklish Picklewickle on the previous lap. TPW with a 1 minute 33 to Andrex's low minute 1:30, and you can see the gap there at the top of the screen is 5.5 seconds. You can see that in the now foreground, or oh no, I was waiting for the camera to change, and Scott, Andrex's teammate, who is up there in the background in the Aston Martin up in front of him, obviously having put a lap on Andrex, with Scott running first in class at the moment. And we're seeing Flaming Parrot very, very close to the back of his teammate Logan. Just a couple of tenths separate the two. So they're driving around in relatively clear air. Oh, Flaming Parrot having a slight moment there, coming through turn 5, but has managed to hold on to it. That has dropped him off the back of his teammate Logan though, and has put a hold on that battle. M-Power has got Bo for company down his inside coming into the final turn, and has lost touch a little bit with the cruiser. The gap has extended out above 1 second. It's 1.2 seconds at the moment. That probably would be due to the lapping LMP3 cars working their way past, and M-Power just having to concede the corner and the racing line in various places to the LMP3 cars to avoid hindering them too much and having his own race ruined. Obviously with that you do lose time to your competitors, but Dakuza probably have to do the same at some point. There's just one more LMP3 car that's coming up behind them. Actually scratch that, sorry, two more. There's a bit more of a gap to the second one. So LMP3 is coming up the inside of M-Power now into turn 6. Smolder is the next GT3 car that will be coming up behind. Smolder currently in third place. Bo has actually managed to get himself up 4.5 seconds behind the Ace. A very quick lap time of 1:17.7 on the previous lap. He's now obviously having to work through traffic, so this lap is going to be slower than his previous lap. But that is 3 seconds quicker than the Ace was on the previous lap. That gap is coming down with 15 minutes remaining. If Bo can keep up the pace that he currently has, we could see Bo closing up onto the race leader. I'm wondering if the Ace is continuing with his fuel saving at the moment. Certainly seems like he is. He's got 25 litres, and obviously the Ace is also having to navigate traffic as well, and you can see there 1.5 seconds this time the difference between the two, so the gap is continuing to diminish. You can see that Bo's got 24.5 litres of fuel, 24.5 litres of fuel for the Ace. But the Ace seems to be needing to save fuel, whereas Bo seems to be pretty much on full attack mode. And that gap is coming down pretty rapidly. Already roughly about a second Bo's taken out on this lap. So very, very soon, in a lap or two's time, we'll probably see the battle for the lead, as we're seeing a battle for last position or second to last position in the GT4 class. Andrex coming down the inside of TPW into the corkscrew. TPW having a little bit of a wiggle there in the braking zone just as he was about to turn into the corner. He's having to concede the position, but with Andrex's lap times being about 3 to 3.5 seconds quicker per lap, it's pretty inevitable that Andrex will be taking that position away from TPW at some point before the end of the race. And his next target, 6 seconds up the road, would be Nyla. So we'll have to keep an eye out for him later on in the race to see if he will close up onto the back of Nyla. And Bo is continuing to decrease that gap at the front of the field. Another 2 seconds, 2.2 seconds taken out of the race leader on that previous lap. So Bo very much the man on the move. The Ace surely going to start feeling the pressure relatively soon, coming from the LMP3 driver, approaching from behind. So I think we'll continue to watch this battle at the moment, as this seems to be the two closest guys. Which is a very quick check with the Kuza and M-Power. Yeah, the gap has eked over to more than 2.5 seconds between them with the lap in traffic that we saw earlier on. So let's ride on board with a lap then with Bo. Let's actually jump into the cockpit cam as well. see he's not really using too much of the rev range. You can actually see he's also actually starting to use different fuel mixture as well. It seems to be on that lean fuel mix, as he isn't quite going up to 100% throttle application. So Bo's now actually starting to feel the need to fuel save, but even still on that previous lap he was a second quicker than Aid the Ace was. We'll stick with Bo on board just to see from his perspective what he is seeing in his Ginetta LMP3 car. Turn 6 comes up on you very, very quickly, pretty much blind. Just have to get the turning reference point right and fling the car into the apex, likewise dropping it down the dip here. Car trying to step away from Bo a little bit, but Bo keeping it nicely under wraps. Very nice line there through the very sweeping turn 9 of Rainy Curve, hooking up that nice late apex, and then coming into the final turn, hooking up the apex here as well. The Ace hold up a little bit, seems, by brake check there in front of him, and again 9/10 of a second difference between Aid the Ace and Bo. The gap has now come down to just over 1.5 seconds. Bo not really having too much of an issue getting past the Aston Martin. Is going to have to leave racing room on the inside though, as he swings around the outside of him in turn 3. Continues on his way though through turn 4. So the guy's got about 18.5 litres of fuel remaining with 10.5 minutes to go. Aid the Ace has in fact got just a little bit more than Bo has currently in the tank. Not by much, only by about 0.8 of a litre. It seems like on this lap the gap is staying a little bit more consistent, unless it's the final sector here that Bo is really strong. It seems like he is taking a couple of attempts out of a second out of Aid the Ace, coming through turns 9 and 10 onto the start-finish straight. The gap now just over 1 second between the two drivers, and about half a second taken out of Aid the Ace's lead on that previous lap. Switching to the roof cam, you can see that the gap is diminished between the two drivers. Here we see Flaming Parrot coming up onto the back of his teammate Logan once again, as they're encountering traffic with, I believe that's Nyla and Andrax. Flaming Parrot dipping the wheels onto the gravel out on the curb there, just on the entry to turn 9. Just gone and sent him out wide. Dakusa there coming up past, as well as Flaming Parrot was rejoining the circuit. That was very unfortunate there, a slight mistake by Flaming Parrot, but we now see Bo only 6/10 of a second behind Aid the Ace, as we're into the final 10 minutes now of this race. 52 minutes have gone near enough, 51 to 52 minute mark we're currently in of this 1 hour long race, and we have still got a fight for the overall race win. It seems like at the moment Bo has the measure over Aid the Ace on this race. Coming into the braking zone for the double left-hander of turn 2. Gap now under half a second. Bo just looking that little bit more comfortable. Well, the guys in terms of fuel, it's now only about half a litre difference, as one of the LMP3 cars is there getting well out of the way, handling the lap traffic very nicely. As Bo there is now right up towards the rear of Aid the Ace. Has got a little bit of a run as he's coming up towards the corkscrew here. Surely Aid the Ace is going to go defensive. Bo isn't going to try and make a diving opportunity coming into the corkscrew, instead is just going to follow him through for the moment. Probably continue to do so. Bo near enough flat out through turn 9, whereas it sounded like there was a bit of a lift from 8 the Ace coming through that corner. I think that's where Bo is making up most of his time. Two guys though, two leaders coming up to some lap traffic as Bo gets very, very close there on the exit of the final turn. And surely he's going to have a bit of a run here with the slipstream of 8 the Ace, and that's going to be to Bo's benefit. However, he's not close enough to mount a challenge coming into the braking zone of turn 2, so he's instead going to continue to follow him around. Got a GT4 car up in front who is not obliged to get out of the rally like the two LMP3 cars that we have just passed. GT4 cars. Oh, that's the opportunity there for Bo. Bo's just gone and taken it with both hands and slotted himself up to the lead. 8 the Ace got caught up behind TPW coming through turn 4, and that left the space and the run for Bo to go and take the lead of this race. Very good opportunistic move there by Bo. Worked out fantastically well for him. Read that situation very, very well. And 8 the Ace has been demoted down into P2. But now the interesting factor is going to be their fuel loads. Who has the better fuel strategy for the remainder of this race? 8 the Ace has now gone and switched himself up back onto the rich fuel mixture now that he's got the slipstream of Bo. That's going to help him in terms of fuel management for this race. There is quite a bit of traffic though up ahead. You can see there we've got a couple of LMP3 cars and a couple of GT4 cars as well. One of them M-Power, and it looks like the other is the Yakuza. Those guys are up there in front of us. Surely these guys are going to be a little bit of a factor here. Maybe 8 the Ace could perform the same move that Bo did on the previous lap coming into turn 4. 8 the Ace and Bo clearing M-Power. There was a little bit of contact, I think, between the Ginetta and Bo as they were lapping him. Coming through past Nyla. 8 the Ace is going to have to dive down the inside into turn 5 there to get past that GT4 car without being hindered too much. You can see that in the background, Yakuza and M-Power have gotten very, very close as well. We shall stick with this battle for the moment. Actually, we'll jump to this battle coming up the hill as M-Power's having a look to the inside of the Yakuza, but with Nyla there, the car, GT4 car being lapped. Unfortunately, M-Power had to back out of it and Nyla dived off the road to avoid that, although it seems like Bo is navigating and siding his way through the LMP3 cars. Still got a couple more GT4 cars to navigate. 8 the Ace is going around the outside in the final turn. Oh, got a Ginetta there. Sorry, Ligier in the wall. Careful there, coming across that Ginetta. You don't come across his nose too much. Coming down the inside there of Andrex under braking. So having a little bit of a look there to the inside of Scott as well. Got a slight squeeze there. That's going to cost 8 the Ace the run off the turn, and that has gone and given Bo a 1.9 second lead at the moment. But 8 the Ace has turned back up onto a rich fuel mixture, and Bo with 9.7 litres has also done the same as well. So now it's just pretty much a pure straight fight, as they've both got quite a bit of clear space in front of them before they get to the next car. It's a pure straight fight between the two in terms of overall race pace, and that will determine who will come away with the race win. 3.5 minutes remaining in this race as we see Brzancic very, very close to the back of his teammate Marco the Pirate. This is battle for 4th position in the LMP3 field. Whoopsie daisy. M-Power and Yakuza have gone to switch positions as well. Just noticed that as we picked up this battle here. Yakuza there in his BMW has lost the position to the Ford Mustang boss of M-Power. That unfortunately happened off camera. We didn't see that change of position, but that could have very well have been in and amongst the lapping LMP3 cars as they were coming through. And we can see there Yakuza trying to move out the way of the Ligier to let him through, and Logan is once again closing up on towards the back of his teammate Flaming Parrot. Battle for 9th and 10th in the LMP3 class, as we now see Yakuza closing up on towards the back of M-Power, as M-Power is getting affected by that traffic, trying to slide their way past. Dakusa does have a Ginetta there lurking in behind him. Surely the Ginetta is going to focus on getting the run coming off this turn, and will pass both of these two guys on the run down towards turn 5, down the inside. Instead he's playing safe. Dakusa's having to give the inside line to that Ginetta. Ginetta has forced the Dakusa off the circuit there on the exit. That's going to cost Dakusa a good few car lengths, but now he's doing the same to Empower as well. This has allowed Dakusa to close back up onto the rear of Empower. The battle for second position is on as Empower slams the door shut just as they were coming up towards the braking zone for the corkscrew. The fight is very much on between these two guys. And Dakusa getting a much better run there, as you see, coming through Rainy Curve into the penultimate turn now, turn 10. Both of the guys relatively evenly matched there. As Empower goes a little bit deep, the Ginetta spun on the exit as well. That's going to cost both drivers the exit that they would have wanted coming off of this turn. Just over a minute remaining in this race. The fight is still very much on between these two. Dakusa is not losing touch to the Ford Mustang boss in front of him, and keeping an eye on that gap at the front of the field. ADACE is keeping that gap to Bo round about a second, although he did have Marauder there in the KTM just in front of him. He's got 5.1 litres remaining, has Bo. ADACE though, he's got 5.6, so both of them should be good on fuel. This lap that they have now begun will be their final lap, as the 30-second countdown that we have remaining, as Empower and Dakusa are going side by side coming in through turn 6, both of them running wide. Dakusa getting back onto the track first. Is this going to allow Dakusa to come back out Empower as they come up on the run towards the corkscrew? There seems to be no love lost between the two as Empower actually goes and cuts the corner a little bit going into the corkscrew. We've got two Ginetta and MP3 cars there behind as well. Dakusa all over the back of Empower as they come into the penultimate turn now. Hopefully the two Ginettas will be relatively patient and wait for the exit of the turn here and wait to pass them coming down the start-finish straight. There goes Smolder, who's currently holding P3, jumping back up to the front of the field. The Ace has got the gap to under a second as well. Which very quickly have a look at Dakusa and Empower, see if Dakusa's making a diving opportunity in towards turn 2. He wasn't initially, but the Ginetta coming through allowed Dakusa to get a little bit closer, but coming through the final turn with a little bit of a wiggle was Bo. He's going to come across the start-finish line to take the race win here for round 3, with ADACE coming home in second place at Laguna Seca. Very good battling between the two. Fantastic move by Bo to get himself up into the lead. He's very quickly jumped back up to the front of the GT4 field. Scott and Andrex, we can see that coming through. They're almost a lap ahead of Empower and Dakusa. Actually, no, sorry. No, they are. there's an 11 second gap between Scott and Empower in second place. Scott will be taking the win here despite that half spin and the contact in turn 2. Be taking that win for the GT4 class as Andrex comes alongside him with a flying photo finish in a nice formation, as Dakusa seems to almost get the better run there over Empower coming off the final turn, but wasn't quite able to make that stick. So Empower coming across the line with Dakusa very closely in third place. So here are your overall finishing positions. Bo taking the race win just ahead of ADACE. Smolder in third, Marco the Pirate in fourth position, Brzanczyk in fifth. Sixth place was Ruddy Bird, seventh place was Menesco. Intergalactic Gentleman comes home in 8th place, 9th place was Logan, and then 10th place was Flame and Parrot, with Peaches in 11th and Aaron retiring from the race coming home in 12th place. That will be your LMP3 finishers. And then for your GT4 finishers, just 8 of the 10 drivers finishing in this race. Scott comes home with the win ahead of D'Couza. In second place, Empower picking up a 12-second penalty that we can see there, demoting him into third place. So despite the two drivers actually battling for position, it was more just a case of D'Couza staying close to the rear of Empower to see him come home in second place. Marauder there in fourth place in his KTM, with Brake Check in fifth, Andrex coming home in sixth. Seventh was TPW, and Neela will round out the GT4 class in 8th position. So that is going to pretty much conclude our race coverage here of round 3 from Mazda Laguna Seca Raceway. An absolutely fantastic race from start to finish, some fantastic battling. We saw some brilliant multi-class action with the GT4 guys battling for the positions at the front of their class, with the LMP3 drivers trying to make their way through that gaggle of cars as well. We saw a fantastic move from Bo on ADAce to take the race win, and overall just fantastic quality racing from all the drivers observed here in our race coverage for the Apex Online Racing IMSA Lights Endurance Series. So next week we are going to be having a break. Like I said, we will be having a break for Valentine's Day, so there won't be any race coverage here of the IMSA Lights Endurance Series on our Thursday night. However, we will return later on of February, where we will be returning for a 90-minute race at Long Beach. So make sure that you subscribe to the Apex Online Racing channel and make sure that you don't miss out on any future live streams. I myself have been Yorkie. I do also have a channel of my own as well, so feel free to take a look at that if you so wish. And yeah, hopefully we shall see you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much for everyone tuning into the live stream. Very much appreciating your support and the presence there in the chat. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hopefully we shall see you in the next one. But until then, have fun, stay safe, and take care.